west side of town, and has since given a long-term lease to the Conservancy for about 7.5 acres. So about 12.5 is still up there, that we own it, and we believe that it is in the will of the town that we continue on this path to development. We'll go into some history later. We plan to issue a request for proposals, go out to the market, find out what developers would be willing to do with this land. They will come back to us with sketches or a rendering of what they want to build and how much money they will pay us for the land to do that. We, as a selectman, then will take those in and sort through them, and we have to take one or more proposals to the town meeting so that the town meeting can authorize the sale. Since, regardless of how well we do our work, if the town meeting says no, nothing happens. So our job is to figure out what town meeting will support, what you will support, and try to take that information, get it back to the developers so that they make proposals that you will support, and we can have 2 or 3 options, and we can pick the best one. That might be asking for too much. If we can, we definitely want to come forward with at least one proposal the town meeting will accept. Otherwise, we've gone to all this trouble for naught. So we want your help in guiding us. Tonight's meeting will have about a 30-minute presentation here with some slides, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments for about an hour. I think by 9 o'clock we should be done. First, we're going to have some history. Jim Johnson is going to, since he was here for most of it, sitting at the selectmen's table, how it is we got ourselves to where we are. And then Lance will come along and tell us what some of our options are going forward, how we can imagine what that land could become, and some of the process issues of how it is we step forward, because it's a little tricky getting approvals for development. So I'll turn it over to Jim.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'd like to all go back to right out.
We're supposed to move this forward. I didn't tell you that. Yes, we have to keep saying that slide. That's what I just talked about. And a couple pictures of the farm. And in specific, this is the whole thing that we bought. And obviously, this is the part that's at least to the concerns.
Good evening. Go back to right after fall town meeting 2006. The Board of Selectmen and Town Manager abruptly informed that the Hamiltons had decided to purchase a sales agreement on Avalon Day to build a mega complex here consisting of about 260 units. After the initial shock of everything, the Board of Selectmen and Town staff put together a very aggressive program to investigate whether or not we can be buying it by exercising our option 61A, which is Locke. Next one. With a lot of work on everybody's point, Board of Selectmen, town staff, primarily citizens of this town, we all worked together and exercised our option in March of 2007. Things went fairly quick after that. We had a special town meeting to approve the purchase. We had an override, successful override vote, and we purchased the previous piece of property of the original Block Grant Fund for $13.5 million, and 82 Ridge Street for $1 million for $500,000. And at that time, we had about $100,000 of soft costs. Town meeting, we developed an RFP, put it out, had several interesting response, and we'll address those in a few minutes, but we did get approval to purchase the property town meeting by the voters. We created the Locke Wright Conservancy back in 2007, and we had an authorization for an RFP to sell the property in spring of 2008. Unfortunately, the sale did not go through based upon the economy. Under that sale, all our issues would have been addressed as far as money goes. Next slide, please. Is that what you said?
Actually, one more back.
One back, I think it's the one where
That's it.
2007 RFP responses, and what we showed, what we were offered. Land for public trust, tourist development. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. That's the app development, which the town meeting finally voted on, and we tried to exercise, which consists of about 82 units, and 2 different parcels of the land, leaving a lot of land free. Now, if you can go back to the other slide, it says the comparison bids, June 2000. As you can see, we had 5 series bidders that we evaluated, did our due diligence on, and ultimately decided to go with the Abbott Engler proposal. We entered into a PS with them. We went through the permitting process with them. We received a few down payments. Unfortunately, they couldn't commit because we couldn't obtain the financing in the deal that we found out a couple years ago. Next slide, please. And back last fall, 2011, the Board of Selectmen rebid the Abbott proposal. We got 4 bids, none of which we felt were to our liking based upon various conditions. Rejected all. Since then, the Board of Selectmen has been evaluating what to do with the 12.5 acres. And we've decided that after due diligence, I have a consultant. We've decided to bring it back to the public for a public input session, probably a couple of them. So we want to hear from you before we make up our mind of what to go do going forward. Next slide. All right, okay. Just some small points of interest. The construction carrying cost of this project is $40,000 a year. Much thanks to Jason Lewis and his team, because he got some home rule petition for very low band pricing for several years. Back in 2007, the town meeting had a target price of $7 million. The impact, if we did not sell the property, or sold it for any amounts below, our listed was about $771,000. If we did not sell the property, it would cost about $124,000 annually. Sold it for if we absorbed the $9 million override, it would be 63. A $6 million override of the taxpayers absorbed would be $62. And a $3 million override would cost us $31. These are project numbers. There's approximately
Over what period?
what?
Over what period? How long would we be assessed?
I believe 25, less the amount of bands, I believe. The band time also kicks in until Monday. And we've had the bands for 7 years, somewhere around 18 to 20 years right now. The band has over that time.
This is a debt exclusion override that's already been voted. It's just that you're not paying for it yet because we hoped we were going to sell it, you never have to pay. So if we decide we're not going to develop it, that means that your tax rate will jump up $124, though that would be declining over the 25-year period until it finally goes to nothing.
Jim, question that 2007 town meeting target sale price. My recollection is that we voted to sell the property to Abbott, and it was not for $7 million.
No, we voted to sell it at 14.
Oh, 14. So it was
Originally, when the town meeting took this forward in the beginning, before we negotiated the RFP, the town meeting indicated they wanted a minimum of $7 million in the very beginning of the project.
Rather, we voted this for 14 million, not for 7.
That's correct. Yes.
What's the median single-family home?
Median single-family homes, the average price of all homes.
No, what is the median? That's the average. The median.
I don't know.
So, well, I'm just following, you know, it's, most people would not be hit with 124.
Maybe nobody would be able to exactly 124, but that's a round number for,
But that more accurate number would be the median, correct?
Actually, the more accurate number would be the cost per million times the actual value, assessed value of the house, which we tried to do, but it was going to get very confusing.
oh yeah, so then that number has to be adjusted for the price, the assessed value of your own house to get a feeling for it.
Just to be clear, you mean if we do nothing, in other words, if you don't sell the property, that's what it would cost the average person, $124 a year?
Yes.
Over
Over a year, approximately 20-year period.
Thank you.
I understood that is the peak year, that is not a.
The first year,
Yes,
it's
there's a graph.
declining
There's
there.
a decline, right.
Good evening, I'm Lance Bransback. I'm going to walk us through some of the discussion we've had about potential development scenarios. I think there's, on the last slide, there was no, if we sell it for more than 3 or up to 14, that would be fine. At this point, there's no decision to be made about what price target, so it's wide open. Okay, next slide, please. What we're going to talk about in the RFP process and the development process, we as a town have to answer a bunch of questions about what we want to offer the developers and what we then will accept. And they're very simple, and Doug will come back to the open discussion to these people's opinions, but basic questions are, you know, on the property, where do you want to develop it? What do you want to develop? I mean, what kind of housing, what numbers, what types of housing, there's a set of things there. When we want to do it, you know, do we want to rush to market soon? Want to wait a year? Want to wait 2 years? Can you guess what the best market will be out there? You want to think about the impacts to the neighborhood and to the town, you know, conservancy, schools, taxes, series of things. And then in the bottom line has to be what's the best buy or best value for the town, balancing the money and the open space and all the other issues out there. So these are issues, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to basically sort of set the framework. We're not going to make decisions tonight, not going to pick an alternative, but the objective is to make sure that we listen to people and say, what's out there? Next slide, please. What we're looking for is a sense from the town, and the board will eventually want to make a decision on what range of scenarios we want to go out for in an RFP. You know, do we want to ask for no development all the way up to a very extreme development? So the question is the town want to go out with an RFP that says to a developer, you can do anything from this end to that end, or do we want to go out to say, we want only proposals that will fall here, or only proposals that will fall here, or only proposals. So the exercise we're going to go through starting tonight is to sort of say, is there any consensus on where we ought to go out along that spectrum? So, next slide, please. Well, let me just back up one. This is just back to the issues, what you're playing with by and large, and you'll see it in the pictures. The development variables are going to be, again, you know, what areas do you want to develop? What type, number, and size of housing units you're going to put on the site? Where do you locate them, and how do you mass them? You know, spread them out, concentrate them. What design? You know, do you want a pretty farm look? Do you want modern Kendall Square? What's your favorite out there? And then we will have choices about site coverage. Do you want to spread it all out and pave everything? Do you want to concentrate it and pave very little? So those are all going to be the pieces. What we will be doing is the same thing we did in the original RFPs and this one, which is basically set up tables like this, where we're basically going to say, we've got a set of development scenarios, and again, what we're looking for is guidance on, you know, are we looking at just limited development, moderate development, or the whole range? So this table could be larger or smaller when it gets finished. And what we're going to be looking at is a series of factors down the side here. I've listed them. This is a short because we ran out of space on the table, but if you go to the next slide, this is the beginnings of a list of things that people wanted to understand when we did the original and then the rebid. So, you know, sale price, what's the fiscal impact of the town longer term, project design, land use, neighborhood impacts, what type of housing is out there, what are we doing, historic, cultural, conservation, transportation. There's a whole series of issues that people want to look at. The intent, we finish this discussion and go out with an RFP, would be to come back and take that information and say, let's rank these things out so we can compare them and go across the list. It'll be a lot of information, but I think people are basically saying it's a critical project for the town. and we need to have a sort of full disclosure and transparency on what we're getting and what the trade-offs are out there. So that's the logic. Okay, you're familiar with the Wright Locke farm. I suspect most of you have been up there. This is north. This is north this way on this particular one. It rotates on a few of these maps. But this is Johnson, High Street, Johnson, and Ridge. High Street goes off there. The hill is here. Farm buildings here. 82 is there. And this line through there is an easement for a high-pressure gas pipeline. So one of the simple things is you're not going to build right on top of the gas pipeline. Pepper Hill Drive here, Edwards Drive here. There are houses obviously to the north on the top side there that are off this particular map, but you can see them in the Google Maps. Next slide, please. This one was really nice red lines with the bulb and the connection on this projector are not doing terribly well, but when we talked about the last bids going out, the land was basically divided up into a set of properties. This property was the housing in the barn, and the area here called Lot C was designated as the conservancy area for development. So what was then put out for development was basically all this area here. There's a little bit of break here, but then across the top on the edge there. So that was what was talked about. And when we talk about what areas to be developed, we will have a choice about which of those pieces we want to sort of break up and put out for RFP. So go a little bit further on that. This is a more readable version of the plan that we're going there. Next slide. What we've done, Board of Selectmen did was hire Dodson and Flinker, landscape architects and planners, and what we asked them to do was to sort of go back and take a look at the site, working for us, a developer, and do an analysis of the site and give us their ideas about what areas might make sense for development. I would emphasize that those are just input to the planning board, they're not the answers, so we in the town, the discussions can adjust the boundaries and talk about what he said. But he basically said, this is by and large the conservancy area that's protected at the moment. There are sections up here, and it could be extended a little further out, that could be developed, that have the sort of right soil conditions. He also said that this area in purple here is developable in some parts of the sort of area here. The sort of light blue areas here are pretty hard to develop, largely because the slopes are so steep, and there's as you recall some of the previous proposals, there's a lot of blasting to be done there to make that buildable. And then he listed, this is the top of the knoll, which is heavily rock. He listed as a maybe. So what he then did, and the next slide please, was block out at least 4 zones. And again, we can carve out 4 zones, 5 zones, whatever we want in the long term, and we can subdivide them. So when he's talking about the development options, he's talking about different types of development in each of these particular zones. Now, this zone is fairly small. The original proposal went out further. We could decide we want to extend this zone. This zone could be subdivided as well. This zone down the south side of it was originally, this is behind the drumline. This area runs over toward Edwards and then the top of the hill. So what he did was basically take each of those 4 zones and sort of begin to mix and match and say, what could I do in each one of them and what would we get out of it? So again, the zones are not fixed. The idea is input to us at this point. The town can go back and say, I want to redraw the boundaries and do elsewhere. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you, and we're not going to go through it in laborious detail, but he basically put out this set of options, ranging from sort of fairly low to fairly intense development. I'll give you some images that are a little bit bigger to read on there. But he went from basically a sort of what he called his option 1, which developed basically some units way in the top corner and way in the southeast corner. We've got about 15 units there. Expanded this one to 30 and 29 with different arrangements, 40 and 47. And what he tried was you'll see, you can barely read your chart, I'm sure, but he tried different mixes of things like single-family cottages, townhouse units, apartment, things like that. So in each case, he varied the mix of things to see what would fit in there. And again, we can come back and tell a developer, what type of development, what type of units, where we want to put it. So there's lots of options, or you can ask the developer to be creative. So this is a range of things that Dodson was looking at. The town is free to go back and look at all of those, or a different set of them and different variations when we go out there. Next one, please. So let me just walk you through a couple of these. The originals of these are PDF on the town website. Take them download. If you have a big screen computer, they're sort of readable. And there's paper copies floating around that are a little bit more legible. But I'll just give you none of these are fixed plans. We're not going to build one of these per se. The developer will presumably come in with their own idea of exactly what this would look like. But again, we did this so we in the town can understand roughly what it would look like. So on this one is low density. He put a series of units down here along Edwards Drive, packed them in reasonably closely, but in what he called a sort of a cluster. So you have, I think this is one that does not have garages on every unit. There's some common garages in the central walkway. So, and they did just a few units up on the right corner there. So this one would be most of the development down here up in the right corner, but it would only gain 15 units. Okay, next slide, please. Plan 2, he then notched it up and said, well, what if we get, and I think this was in the range of 20 or 25 units, put denser, sort of more apartment-style townhouse units down here to get more units in there, and expanded this to be sort of a cluster housing unit again. So the common garages, sort of around the central green area we use there. It gets bigger and works there. 2B does the same thing, but in this case, a little higher density down here, a little lower here, but then expands into the area just behind the drumline on the hill there, and pretty much expands that a bit there. So you're basically getting more units and again different configurations out there. The next one, 3B, is the denser one. He's basically putting in much denser development down here, basically sort of apartments down here in the corner, some cluster townhouses down here behind the drumline, and then keeping this kind of unit up in the corner. And then the last one, 3A, 3B, the reverse here. This one had we were getting up to 47 or 50 units. This one, so the same sort of approach of putting some apartments down here, some townhouses, and leaving this cluster up here. But this one then put a set of units up on top of the knoll, very much as some of the other proposers originally had done. Avalon and Abbott had proposed up there. So this was the maximum level that he worked out. He left a few areas undeveloped, this area across the top. You could trade some of the housing here for housing further out. So there are options on the scheme. So the point we would make is that there are various options. And again, what he's done when you look at them in some detail is say, how do I vary the number of types of houses in each area, and what do I get for that, and what's it look like? Again, the developer will come back with their own proposal. The question for us is, where along this scale would we want to do it, the whole thing or just pieces of it? So the last thing we asked Dodson to do in the next slide was to basically do some architectural viewpoints. So what he did, he picked about, I think there were five, and if you pull down the original PDF, there are pages and pages and pages, and you'll see each one of these. He took a series, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there was one from back of the existing farmhouse looking north. There was a couple looking west, down by the raspberry patch looking west. What he did not do, and Bob Johnson will certainly remind me, he did not develop at this stage viewpoints of what it looked like from, for example, Pepper Hill or Edwards or the other areas, which presumably we could ask a developer or again do ourselves. So what we're going to show, Doug pulled together a set here. What they basically show you is what you would see if you stood on that exact spot and looked out things. This one is the existing. They were standing sort of outside the farmhouse. This would be the barn. You were standing outside the farmhouse on your right and looking north. What you would see today would be the few houses that are up over the top of the ridge there. The Abbott proposal would have covered that whole area on the north side of the houses, and from the farmhouse area, you would have seen. Now these are just sort of sketched in different light. It would look a lot different. The trees, I think, is in general the lighter trees are ones that he would put in when you see the others. They're darker trees than the existing ones. And the one, of course, misleading thing on this is it's all in the middle of summer, so all the trees are full bloom. But in winter, you have to imagine it looking a little bit different. So this is sort of the existing, and this was the sort of worst case we were looking at with Abbott, or at least with the Abbott proposal. The next series of slides look at the fairly dense development options. 3B, we're looking at, you see this sort of cluster of housing up on the top of the farmhouse, and you begin to see, looking out from the farmhouse, you'd see on 3A, looking north from the farmhouse, and both, these would be quite similar to what you'd see from the north.
That white one there is the existing.
Is the existing house, yeah. And the gray ones are the ones that would be added to that, so, again, if you go through. Then if you were looking west, this is looking, if you were standing from the barn, looking out toward the west there, what you'd see right now is this sort of fairly open area. If you were Abbott would have built that, these would have been the 4 or so units that would have been along the Pepperville Drive side, and that's what you would have seen there. So the Dodson next proposal, he looked at 3A and 3B again from these. Again, these are, with the trees fully grown in, but the 3B would have put most of the units behind the hill and the ground level down there. If it were a good winter, you'd see a lot more of those roofs than you would in the summer, depending on the planting group. In 3A, which was the densest of the ones he looked at for us, you would see the housing up on the top of the knoll. And we asked him to push them down as far as he could, but he said because of the amount of rock, you probably wouldn't build down a full basement, you'd build sort of a half basement to minimize the cost of blasting away. So, and you probably still see some of the units in the back here during the winter. There's a full set of these viewpoints, again, from various places on the farm in the PDF, and you can pull them down and take a look at them there. Okay, next slide. The other thing we asked him to do was to take a rough cut at what the costs or revenues might be. So what they did was look at the engineering costs for the site, putting in the roads and the water and sewer and stuff like that, active building. So we haven't looked at all of the options and priced those out. The number of units, 15, the 30, 40, and then the 47. The zones basically indicate the individual areas that were referred to north, south, and like that. And he estimated a site development cost. This is basically the engineering and site preparation chart. And we're going to give you a
We're
copy.
going to make all of this available on the town's website.
Yeah, we'll put it all on the website. So.
You don't have to search it as a town.
Pictures of my back in the middle of the room. And then they ballpark the average sale price per unit, the number of units, and what he comes up with, if you take the sale price and subtract out the development costs, you get a range of value that the town might get today from his estimate. So at the low end, we're looking at something in the 2, and he had, on each one of these, he had a range because he wasn't able to estimate exactly what the prices would be or exactly what a developer would sell for. But up to the high end is in the 7 to 8 range, so it's feasible. This is somewhat consistent with what we heard when Jim was talking about when we went out to the RFP in 2011. So it was roughly this range, a little bit lower on some of those. So it's roughly consistent. So the question then comes back to us is, which of these options, if any, what range of these options are we interested in looking at? And at some point, what do we think is the best buy for this kind of deal? Now, if the developer comes back and says, he wants to do, something too big for $15 million, then I think we would certainly look at that. But the question is, what will the market bear today? And this was the consultant's estimate for us. This is not a developer, but somebody who knows that field, looks at it. This is a starting point for the conversation on what we might want to do, not an end point. Sir?
What are you calling a unit? Is it one house, is a unit one house, or is it one apartment and extended?
Yeah, a unit could be one single family house, could be one townhouse, could be one apartment or one condo. The size can vary. So you could have 15 units, and that could be a mix of single family, townhouses, apartments. So he's using rough averages
You're
here.
talking price per unit, and I want to find out what somebody wants to be buying.
Yeah. So you're looking at a range here, and we did not ask him to do a very detailed analysis. And so this is you want to squint at this when you're looking at these numbers. You don't want to go out and buy them tomorrow morning.
Yes, you had a slide there which showed option 3A and exactly where on the property the price of the unit is. I'm wondering, do you have a slide which shows where Abbott's 86 units would be? This one, I think this is one of the first ones.
Yeah, if you want to go back quite a ways, it'll be in the set that's going on. Keep going.
Page 9.
Yeah, page 9. Yeah, okay. So this was a plan, this was there were some variations to this as it was finally approved, but he built out through the 82 property, all along the crest in the back of the hill here before it drops off. It begins to drop off pretty sharply here. So that they built basically to the top of the hill where the well house area is now, so over that. And then they put 4 12-unit apartment flats. There were, 4 units for each, so 12 units each. So these each had 12 flats in them.
You know,
Can I get this presentation finished, and then we'll be happy to take on some questions.
Okay. Keep going. Okay, back up one. So that's, we asked Dodson to take a look at those. We've got that range as at least a way to visualize and think about sort of pricing and cost of the starting point. Next slide, please. Just want to remind people that this is not a one-shot kind of discussion. If you were to go out with the whole process here, you start neighborhood and town discussion, which is obviously starting. You then go out with an RFP and you get the developer proposals, you go through a selection and review as we did last time. If you found one that was satisfactory, you'd have to go for a purchase and sale agreement, which requires a town meeting approval, obviously. It's in parallel with that, you can negotiate an agreement with the developer for things that are not covered by the actual zoning, like improvements to water and sewer outside. If we're going to do something that's different than the existing Abbott plan, we would have to go back and redo the area plan that was approved and make that match the current version, get that approved. So that it might require certain things. And you get a plan approved for the area, which would go to the ZBA for actual permitting. So there's multiple steps in this process to think through and fine tune and take a look at what was going on. So that's the logic of what we're doing. Again, look at a range of scenarios, figure out what the town's interested in, lay them up against the kind of issues we're concerned about, and see, is there a best buy somewhere in that range at this time? So I guess the chair goes back to Doug for the discussion.
Yeah, we want all sorts of comments and questions, and the questions won't necessarily be answered tonight, but we still want to hear the questions, even if we just put them on the list. And I'm going to write down what we can. I want to, obviously, if we already written down, you don't have to say it again. But are there comments? Ma'am? And rules, you have to say who you are and what street you live on.
Oh, sure. Andrea Chavella from Edward Drive. Is there a reason that one of the options isn't see if the majority of Winchester residents might be happy to pay $124 extra a year for 20 years and keep the way it is? Or has it already been determined that that's not an option?
I wouldn't say that that's not an option. We think that we should figure out how to develop.
Okay.
It's difficult for us to figure out how we ask the town that.
Yeah.
If we hadn't already passed the override, it would be easy. We just go out and ask for an override. And if they said yes, we're done. If they say no, then we have to develop.
Doug, Tony Markey, town meeting member, precinct 2, Harvard Street. I'd like to remind all who are here, and I know this is not going to make me very popular, but when the proposal to acquire this land was sold to the town in the override campaign, it was with the understanding that we would be able to recover the purchase price by selling the property. Granted, the market was a lot, well, I don't know if it was a lot, it was somewhat higher in 2007 than it is today. However, as a result of delays, frankly, it was not a swift process. There were objections to after town meeting voted to sell the property to at a price which would have covered the entire purchase price that we had put into the property. There were objections that delayed the development proposal. I want to remind people of that fact. And because there were people who didn't want to see the land developed, despite the fact that the voters had been told that the land would be developed to recover the purchase price of the property. And those delays brought us into the financial crisis, which hurt the real estate market, which is why Abbott defaulted on its agreement, and we were stuck with having to pay off what's now approximately $12 million balance in the bond issue. So I would ask the selectmen that instead of, and I know you have not decided anything, at all, and these proposals that you presented to us are just that, just proposals, and the field is really open. From my mind, from my constituents in precinct 2, we believe that, or I believe that, and what I've heard from my constituents is that we ought to be able to try to get the maximum development potential so that we can pay off that as much as possible the bond issue. Granted, we probably won't be paying it all off. But I would also, you mentioned, or Lance mentioned earlier, that if we have to do something to rezone the property for something other than the Abbott proposal, that we have to go through a long process, which will further delay matters and make any developer very leery of going into this process and knowing how difficult it is to get a zoning change approved in this town or any other town, since it takes a 2/3 vote of the town meeting, which is a very difficult thing to accomplish, we all know. So that, I think, mitigates in favor of the Abbott proposal, which would fit into the Abbott proposal that was originally agreed to by town meeting.
I think what he's saying is, yeah, maximum dollars.
Maximum
I mean,
development.
and that we know is the spectrum. Do we do nothing? Do we go for maximum dollars? And it's not maximum dollars. We know we don't want to have a lot back. But almost anything else might be.
Well, the Abbott proposal was not that one.
Right, it definitely was not.
It was a concentrated development that left a lot of the land vacant. Remember, we have 12.5 acres that are potentially developable, some not, but a lot of the Abbott proposal left a lot of open space.
I also will make a note that it might require something, and that does require 2/3. It's another problem, but this whole process takes 2/3. We have to figure out a proposal that really has the town behind it. And if we have that, then getting the zoning, it takes time, but it may not be a big problem. Ma'am?
Meredith LaTorre, Water Street. So the more land that you're swallowing up in Winchester, there's not a lot of open land left. This is one of the last areas. Problem with developing is that there's been water runoff problems. That area of Winchester is at higher elevation. And you said that there's rock all behind where some of those units would be. So is the developer concerned about water runoff going to these properties or even down Johnson Road like there was a problem in the past in development?
That's law, right? That they have to, the stormwater runoff cannot be any greater when they're done than when they start.
Or even disruption to the farmland. I mean, what kind of disruptions is any engineer looked at? What this could do to the farmland, anything around it?
Tell me if I'm wrong, but they will have to look at that. I mean, for any proposal, there'll have to be mitigation if the water, stormwater is a nuisance, no?
Well, the stormwater runoff has to be less post-development than pre-development.
Okay, so it can't get worse.
But it could impact the neighborhood because you reduce water flow that is currently going into the neighborhood from undeveloped land.
That will be, I think it's fair to say, a subject of investigation and concern. I mean, that's what a development agreement talks about, so that we can control it. Sir?
Ken and Nakar, 232 High Street. Have we looked at or been approached the Wright Locke Conservancy about the potential of a growing and vibrant farm and what it could potentially generate for revenue or income to the town? Say the decision is no development. So the farm is growing, the farm is becoming a sort of a living, breathing thing. Have we looked at alternatives where that the farm could generate income for the town by being a working, breathing part of the community with education programs and so forth?
Well, I think we are looking at all proposals. I don't think the income from the farm is not going to pass into the town, but we do want the farm to be vibrant, a vital piece of it. So that's part of this tension. Ma'am.
Hi, Susan Andrews, Socrates Way. I just want to make a couple comments. I brought the next generation here with me this evening. I just wanted to say a couple things. One comment that my 11-year-old daughter made was that this meeting should have been held this evening at the farm property so that people could see the impact that developing the farm would actually have on that property and on that neighborhood. Another comment I wanted to make is that the existence of the farm, which I've known about since the override happened 6 years ago when my kids were in preschool, has impacted a greater number of families over those 6 years here in this town. We really became involved with it this year, 5th grade mentor program, raising chickens. That mentor program educated Girl Scouts in this town to the point where one Girl Scout at a bridging, just the other night, a girl I don't know, each girl had to express what was their favorite thing about Girl Scouts in the past year, and a girl was like, I got to learn about chickens and hold a chicken. So just one child again. Teachers at the Vincent Owen School, the entire parent community at the Vincent Owen School was exposed and educated. So I just want people to think about that. Once you destroy an ecosystem, once you destroy a piece of property, that's going to impact our lives, our children's lives, your grandchildren's lives. You can never get that land back. That ecosystem, that ecology, those animals that live up there, and I don't mean the ones that we trucked in, the sheep, the goats, the chickens, the animals, the living things, the coyotes that people look forward to seeing every day, the snakes, all kinds of things up there, the hawks, that will be gone, and it will be gone forever. And I think people need to remember that as well, because we're losing our planet.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Lee Acosta. I live on Fletcher Street. My daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, got us involved in the farm because she wanted to do farm camp. And so now we've started volunteering there, and it's been an amazing experience for us. But on a more practical level, after this Winchester School District going through the ugly, scary process of redistricting, and this next year will be the start of that, the idea of the high impact of all those units of apartments and the possible number of students flooding the Vincent Owen School District. And I'm a Lynch ambassador for the 60 new families that are coming to Lynch that have not moved or anything, just suddenly their kids are attending a different school than their neighbors. And it's been a very emotional thing for all of these parents that I've been speaking to about how we can help them adjust. And the idea that in just possibly a few more years, the redistricting would have to happen would just be very scary to a lot of parents. And we have a nice number of classrooms and class sizes that Vincent Owen, being a larger school, has helped accommodate these changes in the past 5 years. And with the number of young families with young children moving into Winchester, that kind of flood in one spot would really overwhelm the district. And that's something that, I have very emotionally attached to the farm, but I'm more scared that kids will have to go through this whole process over again in just a few years.
I'd point out that the town, in the RFP process, has the option to specify what types of housing they would prefer. So you can say, I want all large single-family houses, or I can, we want smaller units that are less attractive to families. So you have some control in the question of how many units and what types of units to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Valley Park, just down the street. I was on the planning committee that helped develop a plan that the Conservancy is implementing now for the operation of the farm. And, timing is everything, they say, right? And the Hamiltons had exquisite timing. They put a big piece of property on the market just about at the peak of the real estate bubble. And we all, me, you, paid them for it. And, good for them. We then had a proposal to sell it, and my recollection is that we committed to the town to get about more or less half the money back. We did a lot better than that with the Abbott offer, but then there were delays and the market blew up, and we'll never see those valuations again. And I want to make a couple observations about the plan, which is, as I recall, was also endorsed by town meeting, and it included some of those maps we've seen. My recollection is that Lot B, that our plan was that would not be developed on top of the hill. That would be part of the conservation area in part because the viewscapes, the impact of blasting on the neighborhood, and the idea that, would also allow people to hike from the farm around up the hill to the back to other conservation property, I think in Lexington. So you get kind of a broader use. Now that can all be changed, but some of it could be changed. But I think, as I recall from our planning work, the development of that D area would be extraordinarily difficult. And you've got a wetland kind of in the middle next to it, which means greater complexity. The second thing is, this is not a proposal to destroy the farm. That property's been leased to the farm. The plan was developed so the farm would continue to have the land it uses now for the raspberries. It would be nice if we could sell those raspberries, about $500 a jar. Get that all back. That's your solution. Squash. You're not getting the fun for the squash. But it is not to destroy the farm, or to take the farm away. And I think if you keep the D area undeveloped, you're going to have the viewscapes, no more or less. And you're still going to have a lot of area where people can hike to and have trails and enjoy the property even though it's not formally part of the farm. I understand my good friend Sally Quinn probably regrets reminding me this evening because I know her goal is a little different. But I think you can do some development up there, get some of the money back, and still have the farm as a vibrant thing. I would please find that old report that we submitted to town meeting. I probably have it in the box somewhere up in the attic. Because we did do a little extra work on that stuff. We worked with the Concom and some of the other boards. And I think you can do something up there. But, we bought the farm for a reason. We want to try to preserve that too. And again, I'll observe, thank you to you, Jim Johnson, for a great summary. As you both know, no good deed goes unpunished.
Yes, I'm Steve Parkhurst, and I live on Edward Drive, and I serve on the Conservation Commission, but what I have to say is as an individual member, because to my knowledge, the commission has not taken a position on the issue. I don't hold any particular brief for what development we should choose. I personally thought that the Abbott proposal was satisfactory, although it took more of the property than I think many of us would like to have seen. But one issue has not been mentioned here at all, and that is the high school override. And I would urge the selectmen to take your good sweet time on doing anything with Wright Farm. The real estate markets are appreciating. The economy is improving. Let's hope that continues. And it could be that we could get more money for less development in 3 to 5 years from now. Go through the carrying cost of the $40,000 or whatever it is. And I think as important as the Wright Farm is, I think everybody would have to agree that the high school is probably the most significant issue facing us in the immediate future. So I would say put the Wright Lock on the back burner for several years. We have to 3 to 5 years. Resolve the high school issue. Pay the $40,000 carrying cost. And then when the time comes, we recoup the carrying cost and then some with less development for more money.
Are you saying that these two items conflict? Or that we just don't really have the bandwidth to handle both of them at the same time?
I personally don't believe it should be. That's a one man's opinion.
The bandwidth that we...
I think Wright Lock is second fiddle. I put it on the back burner, carry it, and let's see what happens to the markets and resolve the high school.
One thing, Steve, is we've been for 7 years. We have them a little less than 4 years ago. And the assumption is from the start to finish this project is what we get paid for it. We're using about 2 years. We don't have much room for error. So that's why we're trying to plan outward. This is why we're having these meetings.
Well, under the Jim, under the municipal rules, can you roll bands over?
The local option that we had said that we didn't have purchase of the farm because we intended to sell it. No sense in us borrowing all, having all these bonds out there, then we get the money, and then we got an arbitrage problem because if we invest the money, we earn too much interest. And so they said you could just keep rolling the bands, but you can only do that, I thought it was 10 years, so we may be well into it now. This first came up more than 6 years ago.
Could you just explain how you're using the word bands, what that is?
I'm sorry, bond anticipation note. So it's a short-term borrowing
Okay.
because it anticipates that you will have a longer-term borrowing.
Well,
And if we-
won't you have the high school resolved in 2 years?
Say again?
Won't you have the high school issue resolved in 2 years?
That's gonna be.
Well, we will have the override
Yes, it
result.
will.
Yes. We'll have it resolved sooner than that. We will have the override within a year.
All right, and then wait for that and then address the farm.
Yeah.
Well, then,
I would agree. Yes, good idea.
Thank you, Doug. First of all, I want to commend you.
Name and street.
Yeah, I'm Bob Cummings. I live at 75 Pond Street, and I'm a Precinct 7 town meeting member. And I've only been in town for 45 years. So I'm a newcomer. I'm a newcomer. But I have a couple of observations, and I think all the input tonight has been terrific. But a couple of observations. One is, every time we seem to want to develop something, it's always housing. And I go back to when George Whitten built all those two-family homes in what could have been a commercial area, could have been a very remunerative tax base for the town. And what is it now? It's created, I would guess there's at least 50 kids in that neighborhood that are now impacted in the cost of the school system. So I think anything that's done with the farm, first of all, I don't understand why there was never any commercial interest. I mean, aren't there some medical facilities or lawyers or doctors or some type of commercial development as opposed to putting in more housing and more schools and more kids and just, in the end, not creating the revenue that we need. So I guess two things. One is I think that something more than what's been presented should be presented. Secondly, I think saving the farm, as someone has said, in terms of not only from an economic standpoint, but in terms of just to be on the safe side, makes a lot of sense because we're losing land in this town. We don't have any place to develop, and here we have a wonderful property. And let's not just throw a bunch of more houses up and more kids and more expense to the town. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And as a final footnote, and I know there'll be dog lovers in this neighborhood, one of the things we could do on the farm is put in a nice dog park. Thank you.
I just have to remind you that developers will give us bids on what they want to develop. And I don't think we got any bids for commercial bids.
The town did look at that, and we asked, at some point we asked that, and the commercial developers told us flat, no, forget it. It's too far from services, it's too hard, too expensive to develop the traffic access to housing. So they just said thank you, no office, no industrial. I mean, it would have been a use, but they said flat out, thank you, no.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Silver Knives, I'm Precinct 6. I just have a question. When you talk in terms of your different sorts of housing units and potentially putting in smaller ones that would be less attractive to families, are you, in addition to that, and I think you might have addressed it, but I didn't quite get it, dealing with something to do with the zoning that would prevent those little units from 2 years later becoming much larger units? That's something we see a lot of in the section of town where we live, which is where this farm is. The older houses particularly, but even newer houses where families look at them and say, oh, it's in a great school district, it's in a great neighborhood, it's a teeny tiny house, we'll just add on or spend $500,000 or $600,000, knock it down and build a McMansion.
The town can specify what kind of housing it wants.
Well,
And the regulation, this is going to be developed under what's called the attached residential cluster development. It's an overlay district to the existing zoning, and it's quite restrictive. Once you develop it there, it would not be easy to expand units or rebuild them.
Okay.
And the town can specify that in the development.
Stefan Nagel, Allen Road on the east side of town, other side of town. One of the things that hasn't come up in this discussion and might be included in your spectrum is the idea of invoking the participation, I think, more of conservation groups. And by that and through that, even to the extent, I know this might sound like pie in the sky, but in fact it's very viable and works in the rest of the country, to the extent of purchase and development rights. So we have value, we have financial value in this property. There are organizations out there, in fact the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that administers some of these programs, where the value of those development rights associated with properties will be purchased. And the purchase will then be effected through conservation easements, agricultural preservation restrictions, and the money is made available. It takes a while. There can be fundraising, this, following up on Steve's idea, this interim period until the resolution of the high school matter can be used as a time, first of all, to identify potential sources of funding, but then even to set up a campaign whereby even individuals within the town of Winchester can contribute to funds that can be used, charitable funds, by the way, that could be used to purchase these development rights. And it's worked in the past in other contexts, in other settings, and it might be something that could be used in conjunction with some of the development scenarios or even in lieu of the development scenario. You can probably let it go.
Yeah, that's a zone.
Speak up. Speak up.
Turn around.
No, good. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm concerned that when you select a development area, additional land will be torn up for stormwater management systems. For instance, if you build all those houses on the top of that hill, in the past there have been suggestions that, well, the filtration building will be at the bottom of the hill. So that land would be all torn up in addition to what was ever developed for houses. So I think it's important that when the selectmen talk to the RFP, that where they're going to put the filtration and stormwater management systems should be important. Of course, I would put as much conservation as possible.
Cynthia Lotto, Wainwright Road. I think that no one really expects to get more than $6 or $7 million for any development proposal. So I'm wondering why the town doesn't go out now to long-term finance while interest rates are very low, at least pay $6 million. Because if you wait 2 or 3 years, interest rates will start to go up. You still have to finance $6 million or whatever we don't get back in development. So why not do it now and lock in low interest rates?
I think that makes a very good point. Your finance committee heritage comes through. That is not germane for tonight. I think that is a topic that we should discuss, but it's a financial one, not a one of development. Mr. White.
Excuse my voice, I've got a little bronchitis. My name is Jim Whitehead, Precinct 7, Salisbury Street, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Wright Farm Conservancy. In previous meetings, we've made it perfectly clear that we would prefer that land not be developed, and that should the selectmen determine to proceed with development, that they do so in a way as to maintain our access to essential parking space and not destroy the rural ambience of the land, at least to the Conservancy. Tonight I'm here to make 3 requests. First, as indicated in the Dodson-Flinker report, the land not leased by the Conservancy may be viewed as 5 separate development areas, 3 in the southwest corner of the property and 2 in the northeast corner of the property. We would ask that any development RFP bid each of those areas separately. Secondly, that no development be permitted in the northwest corner of the property to preserve the link between the open space of the leased land and that of the adjoining conservation land in Lexington and Winchester. I refer, of course, to the 100-acre Whipple Hill parcel in the adjacent Locke Farm Conservation Area. And third, that any RFP for development of the land be deferred to 2014 at the earliest, in order to permit the Conservancy time to raise the funds necessary to take some or all of the land off the table. Tonight I'm here to announce that next week the Conservancy will kick off a public campaign to raise the funds necessary for the purchase of that portion of the farm we do not currently lease. I'm also pleased to announce that thanks to some very generous Winchester residents, we are starting our campaign with pledges in hand in excess of $2 million. The act of default has given us the gift of time to become established, time to develop and offer robust programs, and the time to take advantage of the generous support of the community such that in a very short period of time, the farm has become a living presence in our community as well as in other communities nearby. We now offer a range of educational programs, and in any given school year, we reach over 500 students through classes, scheduled day trips and programs for homeschooled children, and others. This doesn't count visits to the farm by scout groups, preschools, or many parents and grandparents we see visiting the farm every day with their children and grandchildren. We've doubled our K-5 summer programs, and we're building new connections between the farm and Winchester Public Schools. In other words, we're a thriving, growing organization thanks to that gift of time. Tonight, we once again are asking for the gift of time. Time to raise the funds necessary for the land acquisition, and time to work with you to achieve a win-win for the citizens of Winchester. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know which one.
That one.
Yeah, stand up, you have to tell me your name and where you live.
My name is Michael Lampy, and I live on Socrates Way. And I think we should keep the farm, and it's really fun for me and my family. And they seem to me.
John County Meeting, I live at 45 Chester Street. I'm on the side of getting our money back. When we bought that land, it was with the explicit published intention of recovering the $12.5–13 million in profit, flipping it as quickly as possible to an appropriate developer. We basically protected that land and that neighborhood from Avalon Bay putting in 250 houses. Okay, and then we were to flip it to a developer like Emmett. Well, that didn't happen, obviously, but still, I personally am eager to get the $12.5 million back. I must say that I probably consume myself more raspberries than anybody in the room, maybe anybody in this town. My entire life, I have a raspberry preserve sandwich, peanut butter and jam, and one glass of every night of my life.
Would you pay $500?
But I don't want to pay $12.5 million. There's a related unwanted development going on right now in my neighborhood, what we refer to as the CPS neighbor store. Now that neighborhood, my neighborhood, would prefer that the town buy that land and put it in the frog pond or a salmon fish. That's not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen. You know, the town should not be in the business of favoring one perhaps affluent, politically connected neighborhood over another neighborhood. This is the reality. Okay? So I don't think the town should be doing this sort of thing. And as for getting the $12.5 million back, now we're already saying, well, $6 million would be okay. It's not okay. I'm troubled by the existence of the Conservancy itself. The Conservancy has probably the 7 most desirable, acres in the middle of the place, which makes it less attractive for a developer to buy it. So that should make, the farmers among us very happy. But it doesn't make them happy. They want to now put this place in perpetuity, in some kind of protected tunnel, and never sell it, just leave it the way it is. I'm positively opposed to that. I want to flip it ASAP for the full amount.
Well, John, wait a minute, back up. The cost, we're not gonna flip it. The assumptions are, from the experts we've talked to, we're not gonna sell it for $12 million, or $12.5 million.
We almost did, didn't we?
We sold it for 14, but the deal went bad because we were paid for a spot, it didn't work. We're not gonna, from what all indications I have in the Board of Selectmen, talking to experts, we're not gonna get $12.5 million. So don't go away with this meeting thinking you're gonna get anywhere near that. Because unfortunately, even if we sell it, we're not gonna get that number. It's not gonna happen.
Pardon me, but everything that I hear and read is that the real estate market is improving, is recovering. Is that not true?
If you say so.
What it's worth is anybody's guess until a proposal comes in hand. And even then, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get our money, as history has shown. Other comments?
Roger Wilson, I'm from John and Tony's neighborhood, 81 Irving Street, and I just want to ask a question at this point. I'd like to state an opinion later, but to Stephen Nagel's point about selling development rights, have we explored with the budding towns the possibility of their raising funds maybe for development rights because they have an interest in protecting their conservation land and particularly Lexington?
I think it's fair to say we have not investigated those. We can help if you can lead us down the path, because it sounds like something that might work, and we're in a position of looking for things that might work. Sir?
Dan Hamlin, from Englewood. Every proposal you have is do this, do the whole thing one shot. You're chopping up in pieces. The neighborhood, the people who live beyond on the plans you've been showing, that are up on top, are on High Street Extension.
Yes.
If you put the same neighborhood back on the top of that ridge, you're into probably $8 or $10 million before you start building not anywhere near Edward Drive, because that's the kind of houses that are on the other side of the ridge.
Well,
Can you build can it be spread over enough time so that it can be spread? You get one large house, no one's going to build a small house next to it, they're going to build a larger one.
One of these proposals does show 3 single-family homes, and I think they would be big ones. Yes, because that's what their neighbors are, and why would anybody build little ones if they can sell them for $1.25 million? I don't mean that gets us some money. It doesn't get us
No,
$600 million.
Well, but the properties on High Street Extension are bringing the town a very nice revenue in real estate taxes.
Well, it is true that when we develop this, we will get real estate taxes.
Yes, but if you develop it to those high-end places, then you will get more taxes, and you might be able to, but if you develop it on the low end, you're not going to get real estate taxes, and you're going to get an appreciable number of children. If you're on the high end, then there's a good possibility that the people that decide the schools in Winchester are not what I want. I'm going to send my kid out to someplace else.
You're right. There are lots of variables here. We do know that the type of housing has some effect on the residents. Most families want yards. So if these things are townhouses, they might have kids, but they'll probably bring in more adults. that is part of what we're talking about here. How do we,
If the properties can be sold singly and spread it out over a number of years.
oh, you mean we should divide it up into little pieces and sell it as we go?
In cooperation with a contractor.
I don't want to be at this job for.
Enough so that whoever's absolutely doing the building or doing the groundwork to get the whole thing done, they take it in pieces and they will make more, and we will make more.
I'm guessing that there has to, and I'm just talking off the top of my head here, but to develop those three houses, you probably want to put the utilities in at once. I would think that would be cheaper. I'm not a developer.
But not sell, but not
You
sell.
could, I mean, if the town decides, I mean, one of the things that Dawson looked at up in the northwest was putting in single-family houses. So again, in the spread of development options, the town could say, we want to put that zone up for bid, and we want to see single-family houses there, and we can see what developers, and they tell us whether they do it all at once or over time, but that could be an option.
You just said one thing that's
I did.
causing me some concern. You said most people want yards. I live in the north side of town on Water Street. And if this is the case, why is development being allowed, which develops right to the absolute 15 to 20 feet from the property line with no yards, and the houses actually look like barracks? We're in a neighborhood where the houses are very small, and the new houses that are coming in are way out of proportion for the age of the houses and for the size of the houses that exist there. So why are they being allowed to develop like that when you said most people want yards?
Well, allowance is zoning. Is there anybody who bought one of those barracks houses here and tell us why they bought them?
The corner of Brunswick Street and Water Street, the latest one, developed by Murray. And Murray's from Burlington is developing every spare piece of property in my neighborhood, right up to the perimeter where they can legally sell no yards.
Yes, right, yeah, we're getting close to
Precinct 4. I'll lay out my concerns, but before I do that, I want to say that I am very much in awe of the farm and what the people, the conservancy people have done. You are an absolutely amazing group of people. When I step back and I look at the map, what I see is Whipple Hill, which is about 122 acres of conservation area, and then the Wright Locke conservation area, another, 22 acres of conservation area, and the Winning Farm, a 33-acre conservation area, which was supported by the taxpayers' money. There is good conservation area in there. We're looking at, on this parcel, the part that, there's the farm, and that's 7 and some odd acres, and then 12 and a half acres for development, more or less, as the pictures were showing. What I worry about is fairness, and the planning board knows that I kept saying, where is the long-range plan? The long-range plan for the development of the whole town. We have invested in conservation in this area already. Is it our plan to make investments in other parts of town? It would seem to me that that would be fair, rather than to keep investing in the same area. Okay, that's my big concern, and that I'll be watching as we go through this process.
Investing in housing or investing in open space?
conservation.
Do we have the...
Which are you worried about?
Well, I'm concerned about the originally, and to be honest with you, my recollection of the override was that it's a slam dunk. We can It's a formula that is used a lot, where you have a big area, you purchase the whole area, and then you shave off a fraction and develop that to pay for the purchase of it. And that was my recollection of what our strategy was. And then history stepped in. So I originally supported the override because I thought that the understanding was that we get our money back. We can have our cake and eat it too. And so I feel an obligation to try and get that money back to the taxpayers as I recall was promised.
I think it's very, that was my recollection too. Whether or not that's still what we want is the question. That was, there's been some water over the dam since then. We have to redecide.
Well, I guess that's the question of the long-term plan is, so what happens if after you're going to have these arguments and you can't develop anymore? How is Winchester going to make money? You just keep hiking taxes up for people, or do you develop any kind of commercial property and bring in revenue? I mean, what are you going to do when there's no land left? You're going to build up, like apartment buildings? I mean,
I think Winchester's going to do very little because we own very little land that we have any intention of selling. I mean, we're not, other people might come in and develop it as Murray has.
but why is he being allowed to? Why is there no protection for people who live in Winchester and have lived there? There doesn't seem to be any protection. This person is coming in apparently doing whatever he wants.
It must follow something. I don't want to get it wrong.
I'm Rick Goldberg. I live in Precinct 4 on Perkins Road. I have a couple of points I haven't heard. Okay. First, my recollection of the bond was that the town would have an override to pay for the purchase of the farm over a 20-year period. At the end of the 20-year period, that it would be paid for. Now, I think there's 12 years left or something like that. So that's one point. The other point is, has anybody calculated the finances of the real estate taxes against the increased cost of schooling and fire protection, police and snow plowing and on and on and on, that we don't know, that we can't legislate, and we don't know?
So when town meeting considered all of the proposals that came forward in 2008, the Finance Committee assisted the Board of Selectmen by doing just the type of financial analysis that we were referring to. The 20-year net present value, that looked at the real estate taxes that you referred to, that looked at the likely number of children that would come in for the type of housing and what that expense would be, that considered at what point do we need another fire truck. And that's the same type of analysis that would happen on any proposed development.
So that was a positive result. In other words, we wouldn't have to have another override in the future to pay for those town services for these new residents.
That's true. And then the belief was that the taxes more than pay for the cost of the services.
But this was under assumptions that not everybody can make about the number of kids.
That's true. A lot of assumptions that we certainly can't make them now without a proposal. And even if you have a proposal, they're just darts at the board.
Keep in mind, the Abbott proposal, the 48 of those units were to be age restricted.
By law?
By law.
How can you do that?
State law allows you to do that. It was to be 55 and over. That was relaxed in the second bid that went out to, and we're not sure what development.
What about grandkids moving in? Is that in the law?
There's a lot of
What about the storm runoff to the residents of Arlington who live below that farm? And if you pave a bunch of that land, won't they have an additional storm runoff?
State and town law says that you cannot have more volume and faster runoff afterward than you did before. So you either have to trap it on the site and infiltrate it or manage it. It is, the state law now says it's pretty explicit, and you have to deal with that. So you just can't let it flow on into the neighbors.
A couple more.
Barbara Landau, 10 Monticello Road. Clearly, we're dealing with a balancing act between the finances and preservation. But I think we could go a long way towards bridging that if we could include requirements in any RFP for a developer to go beyond just considering the massing and the stormwater runoff and consider other issues that would make any development more compatible with the farm. There are many designers and planners out there who have thought long and hard and come up with ways to do this. And anything from heaping meadows instead of lawns with pesticides and herbicides, to how you build your buildings, what types of materials, how the infrastructure is put in, to make it fit in better and not be such a harsh break from the wonderful land and jewel that we have. So I would just urge you to consider including that in our
Those are good topics that I can't say that I understand particularly well. If there's some way we can get some of that into an RFP, because I do believe we've got this, we've got no development, complete development, and we're hoping it's not just a midpoint, but that there's some way we can move it sideways and say, well, that's better for everybody if we end up over there. Yes, ma'am.
Carolyn Anthony from Socrates Way, and I think you should keep the farm because a lot of kids go there and they have fun instead of just sitting at home on their video games. And there are a lot of animals at the ecosystem, and today in the world we're all about being green and saving the land, but now we're letting people go in and develop the land when everyone's recycling and trying to stop that. And there are a lot of recreational programs, and kids get involved in that.
We have a long-term lease with the farm. The farm is going to stay. Sir.
Hi, Bob Kuczewski, town meeting member from Albemarle. I have a question around development, what kind of restrictions you put on the development. There's some questions about schools. The reality, I think, is that we're going to end up redistricting within 5 years anyway, the lines are. But to get to that, we need to talk about if we're going to add new houses here. And again, I'd love to see private funding pay for the land and keep it conservative. But we can't do that. We've recently done a number of developments where we've had age restrictions, we've had housing size restrictions. Greystone Circle is a good example of that, where there's no age restrictions, but the houses were made real small. How effective is that in limiting the number of children? I think Greystone just finished, and they've sold a whole bunch of houses right now. How many children moved in there? How many new students are sending up to BO as a result?
Relatively few, I think.
I mean, we don't need to have the answer. That's one of the questions.
Relatively few. The developers will tell you the smaller the units, the less likely you're going to get large families moving in. Right. And under the ARC dot overlay zoning the town has very tight control over the number and type and location of those units. The Abbott plan was controlled to, 48 flats of, 1,200 square feet, and then townhouses. Right. So the town, if the town can come to a consensus on what we want, then the town meeting can put through very, very tight controls on what you want. It's not like the existing zoning in the, land use neighborhood.
One more question.
But it's not a question, but more a statement that I think we could all agree that if we can raise substantial money, almost all of us do agree, if we raise substantial money to preserve the whole property, that would be a fantastic outcome for the community. So I think we all just keep in mind that let's work on this and let's see if that reality can become the reality.
There'll be a link on the website, the Winchester Town website, or both. Well, a link on the Town of Winchester website to the Conservancy so that people who stumble upon it can donate easily.
But to find the Conservancy website or to find the...
As one easy way for people to donate, because I have to imagine a number of people in this town who have been fortunate financially, that there probably are, probably raised a little money, good for you to have already done that. But make it easy, make there a link on your town.
We've got a butter here who wants to make a statement, and then we're done.
I sense there's a concern that I overly input already. Bob Johnson, in the regard, town meeting member. That's my job. Just spoke to the authorities. I've made numerous reports, as they well know. I'd just like to say that in general, there's pretty much of a feeling that then this adoption option, the option way to go is way to prove our own together cast. We have some openness that are improving as we go forward. There are some problems with it, which I've long enumerated. There's a problem with density, there's a problem with building height, there's a problem with that number 3B you saw with the 4-story apartment buildings. There's a little bit of a height problem. There's no way that will cover that. There's a problem with density and so on and so forth. But in general, I just want to reiterate that I will be submitting more questions for the board in regards to, are you going to finally be able to define density? How are you going to measure density? Units per acre? Is it going to be based on what equivalents and so on and so forth? Density is going to prove to be a very important part of this as we go forward. What I'm referring to is that they've done a good job with this new set of options Dawson came forward. They're getting away from the appetite, that big abusive thing. They're getting off the big hill, but that blasting, that thing required over 120 days of blasting, 150 days of crushing, and like 170 days to transport it out of there. I mean, that's just too brutal for me. I wouldn't hear it. I said I'd be brief, but I don't think the rules came in the second period before we get done here. But we're making progress, we're headed in the right direction, and there are problems with the applicant. Let's please not go back in that direction.